Mr. Griswold, stop, please, Master Williams ordered him. Digger stared at her, and I could see him take in and let out a big breath. The judge lowered her voice. Look, she explained in a kinder voice. That's not appropriate here. I promise you will have a chance to say whatever you want later, but not now. She bent her head to write something on the papers in front of her, and attorneys up front started whispering, because I guessed Digger wasn't supposed to go on like that. But I'd stood up out of my seat. I was so moved by what he said, how he too had finally come forth with the truth. Mom tugged on my jacket and I sat down. Then we waited a few minutes. I'm not sure why. When Master Williams spoke again, she turned to a man at the side of the courtroom and asked, Has either of these boys been charged with a crime before? That's the bailiff, Mr. Anderson whispered. He's got all their background information. The bailiff replied, No, Your Honor. Master Williams went on to ask JT and Digger a bunch of questions: how old they were, how much school they'd had, were they under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or medication. The state's attorney, Mr. Fine, stood up again. He announced that although the D'Angelos were not in court, they had written a victim's impact statement, which he would read. Let me tell you, it tore everyone up pretty badly. I heard Mrs. D'Angelo's voice behind every word. Ben was supposed to start nursery school next month. Now there will be an empty cubby where he would have hung his Winnie the Pooh jacket. There won't be finger paint pictures to hang up on our refrigerator, or birthday parties to prepare for anymore. The tricycle we ordered is still in a box in the basement. No more stories in bed. There is not a single moment goes by when we don't think of our son. I bit my bottom lip hard to stop from crying because I knew that the D'Angelos would never get over losing Ben. I knew from losing my baby sister that the pain gets a little less the more the time passes, that you go on living and you learn how to cope with it. But it's like my mom said, even though Amanda died, she'd always be a part of who we are. At one point, when I covered my eyes with my hand, Mom suggested I leave the courtroom, but I shook my head no and took the Kleenex she offered. She squeezed my hand because she was having a hard time, as hard a time as I was, getting through the D'Angelo statement. I couldn't see JT or Digger's reaction because my head was down the whole time. When it was over, everyone kind of needed a minute. I glanced up through watery eyes to see JT standing in front of the judge again. His lawyer, a woman in bright red suit with thick jet black hair brushing her shoulders, stood with him. She and JT didn't look like they belonged together. He was taller than her, for one thing, and I hoped that didn't prove to be bad. Your Honor, I would like to begin by pointing out that Jeremy Tyler has never been in trouble with the law before, his lawyer began. As I'm sure you've read in the reports, he is a good student, a loving son, and a hard worker. Up until 6th grade, he was homeschooled by his mother. His grades at school have been all A's and B's. He is active in a youth group at the church he attends with his family, and every day in the summer he puts in a full 8 hours of work on the family's chicken farm. I felt a twitch in my back. I wanted to jump up and tell everybody that sometimes JT hauled out of bed at midnight or 2 a.m. and worked clear through the night because those chicken buyers collected around the clock. Your Honor, the lawyer went on, Jeremy was not a willing participant in this criminal act. He felt pressured to help his friend Michael Griswold. Even though Jeremy was present when Michael drilled those holes in the kayak and then replugged them, Jeremy nevertheless believed that the kayak would sink fairly quickly as a practical joke, forcing Mr. D'Angelo to take a cold swim into shore. He did worry that they might get caught and have to pay to replace the kayak, but it never occurred to Jeremy that Mrs. D'Angelo and her young son might be the ones to take the boat out first, or that any actual harm would come to anyone. Of course he didn't want to harm anyone. JT had a good heart. The best. Your Honor, due to the fact that his father is seriously ill and in the hospital, Jeremy is needed at home. And may I remind the court that Jeremy is only 13 years old. We ask you to please understand that he is still in many ways a child, easily swayed by peer pressure. It's true. JT was just a kid, just like me. He didn't mean to hurt anyone. I wiped a tear from the corner of my eye. All right then, Master Williams said. She tilted her head toward Digger. Mr. Griswold,